video game
Yeah,
business.
right.
Joining us is Jeff Johnson, of course. He is with Politic365.com. And one of the things that I've been talking about all morning, and Jeff, we talk about it all the time as well, we cannot leave our power at home by ignoring local races and spending all of our time focused on national campaigns.
No, not at all. We saw in 2009, I think people remember historic turnouts in 2008. In 2009, you saw historic stay-at-home numbers.
Virginia gubernatorial race was one of them.
The mayor's race of New York,
Yep.
if I'm not mistaken, turned out in some precincts 7%.
Had Thompson lost by 50,000 votes to Bloomberg.
Exactly.
Had black folks turned out in New York for Thompson, like they did for Obama, Thompson would have beaten Bloomberg.
Absolutely. So we have to have a responsibility. And if we're honest, the issues that we complain about the most are the ones that are affected by local races.
Schools, that's one thing, but also jobs.
I don't know if he's losing credibility. I think they just have to double back and get back in front of this, because at the end of the day, we always knew this was complex legislation. I think most of us that were sophisticated enough knew that it wasn't going to be for every American. It was for a certain kind of American that couldn't afford or wasn't covered. And I think the messaging needs to go back to who this is actually for, how they get it, and who it's not for. And if they can message that better than they have thus far, I think the credibility is still there.
Still falls to your local state exchange to get you signed up. And they were doing that without benefit of Obamacare.
Yeah, but many of them weren't, and too many of them weren't, and there were still too many elderly people that could not afford prescription drugs. There are too many college students that I'm talking to on a regular basis that were not covered. People like my father, who just passed in May, who with a pre-existing condition wouldn't have been able to be covered. None of those things are being covered within states. And so this did address the crisis. I don't think anybody expected this piece of legislation to be perfect, and it has a number of challenges to it. But enacting the Affordable Care Act still began to address in a substantive way what no other policy previously did. And so the question now is, how do we fix it? How do we move it in a place and evolve it in a place where it gets better, not begin to talk about how it hasn't done anything and hasn't addressed the crisis?
No. Outside
and fairly, there are some wives that are as upset about their husbands playing golf
very true
as they are playing video games.
But see, luckily, my wife said,